Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Lehr. The focus of today is the 222, or 221 and 222 Scout car. The light puncher Spielwagen. Initial focus here being the unupgraded variant, of course, the sort of thing you start out with. Some slight changes have been here made to the Scout car in the March deployment patch. It's been made a bit tougher now, so you can actually, for example, take a hit from a tank or a field gun. If you run into a mine, you're still likely going to lose it, though. I mean, no dice there. Overall, though, still, you start out with something like machine gun. It's reasonably okay, but not the world's best thing. Can be used from light harassment and such. But overall, it's not something that's going to knock the socks off your opponent. And usually what you'll be getting is also something, I mean, you pretty much only get it to get for is the 2mm or 20mm autocannon upgrade, which makes it into the 222 Scout car and makes it considerably more nasty towards infantry and light vehicles. Costs 55 munitions, reasonably effective, can also work a bit as an anti-aircraft gun, which is usually not what you use it for though. But overall, a nice little gun. Can be quite devastating towards light vehicles and infantry and any support crews it can get close to. So it's something to be aware of, but of course, try to stay careful of mines. And of course, try not to expose it too much either. It's not a tank. Now, of course, when there's little infantry around, they're rather spread out. For example, immediately it becomes nice. And see, here's one thing though about the 222. When you actually get it close, because while such a weapon like the autocannon has scatter, up close, there is considerably less scatter if there's actually none, if I'm not mistaken. In this support, it actually does a lot more damage if you can close into an opponent. Which, for example, makes it really good, for example, for dealing with support weapons, if you can stay within range. For example, right here, I mean, it cleared out the entire mortar crew pretty swiftly. So in that department, the Scout car, all of a sudden, the armoured car, for example, has a bit more of a role where previously they actually struggled a bit, but now, for example, it's actually quite good at harassing, striking upon unguarded support units. You can move up to close to them and just give them a full volley, absolutely tearing the living snot out of them. Of course, at range it's still reasonably alright, but really, if you can get it up close to any kind of unit, it's great. Stay away from conscripts, though, if you know they're anti-tank grenades, unless they're retreating. And of course, in that department, the Scout car is actually also quite nice now. It actually can tear apart an enemy retreating units much more solidly with the autocannon upgrades. So in that department, of course, as a Soviet opponent, you do need to be a bit more careful when these things are around on the battlefield, since a rather nasty German player will, of course, try to sort of aim to do as much damage as possible with the armoured car. Of course, here we do see the sort of one of the more natural counters still. The Guards infantry squad there with the PTRS anti-tank rifle. The armoured car can, of course, withstand a few more shots, but overall not that much. So, of course, you still have to generally be careful around Guards infantry with the armoured car. So that is, of course, something to be vital of, or vitally aware of. But overall, I mean, the armoured car now certainly has a lot more utility than it previously did. And certainly is actually something I can actually recommend getting now if you sort of prefer more mobile, more fleet-footed gameplay. Also, and just prefer, dealing with an opponent. For example, it's also quite handy, for example, if you have an opponent who's gone for a lot of support weapons. I think, though, you should get more than one in those cases and basically just sort of try and harass them, deal with them, attack from several angles, get close to the support weapons, and just eat through them with the autocannons. I mean, really, again, it is with the autocannon that all the goods are. On the armoured car, it is with the autocannon you really get the most out of it. Of course, you also have the infantry awareness ability, and that's not exactly a bad thing to have either if you want to get a bit aggressive with it. It pretty much allows you to sort of see on the minimap any infantry nearby, which ensures you can actually try and avoid running into an ambush, like say someone's waiting with an anti-tank grenade. But thanks to infantry awareness, you can avoid that. It also, of course, there's a sniper hidden somewhere, but he's not shooting, he's keeping quiet. Pop infantry awareness, oh, he's over there. And that kind of thing, infantry awareness, can be quite handy in sort of doing something with, if you're paying slight attention. But otherwise, I mean, the autocannon upgraded armoured car can be quite handy, getting a few shots here, do a bit of damage though, overall again. No, I mean, at range it will take a bit more time. And of course, in this department, the Guardsmen around, you generally want to stay a bit of range. And of course, as it gets more and more veterans, it of course becomes more and more lethal. In particular, as the autocannon then gains more accuracy. Right here, of course, we see breaking up the kills. Guardsmen opening up, and that's of course we see the armoured car forced to pull back a bit here, and of course, generally, I mean, you want to be careful with sort of direct engagement using the armoured car, as it's not really where it excels. You could, of course, also consider combining it with things like the doctrinal spotting scopes upgrade from either Jägerarme or Mechanized to increase its line of sight, of course. And for example, also now with Veteran 2, you can actually see rather far away. I mean, that, of course, is another reason to get the armoured car, and perhaps not something always considered, but for example, at Veteran 2, it can actually see quite a bit, and that also makes it a good support unit in that department as well, you know. Have an armoured car, you know, once the fighting progresses to a certain point, you know, have it sort of take up position by support weapons, and make them a lot harder for your opponent to sneak up on. Have it sight for your snipers, have it sight for your packs, or any other sort of weapons with long range, and there you go, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, again, with spotting scopes, I mean, it becomes even more drastically far-sighted at Veteran 2. That, of course, is another little fun fact you sort of try and keep in mind when then using your armoured car for the good of Germany. Again, though, guardsmen conscripts with anti-tank grenades tend to be a bit of a danger, and guardsmen in a scout car also tend to be sort of one of the primary methods for dealing with an armoured car still. Of course, anti-tank guns with the small kind field guns will, of course, provide an issue, and so will tanks. So, I mean, it's not like it's omnipotent, but certainly a well-used armoured car can really do quite a bit of good for you. And again, I mean, depending on what your opponent aims for, I mean, you might get one, you might get two, you might get more. I mean, if your opponent goes for a lot of support weapons, a pair of them will actually be quite good sort of striking in. For example, falling upon a field gun, quickly clearing that, then clearing out the rest. Because, again, with those autocannons up close, they will be able to really tear through those support crews rather fast. That is rather good to keep in mind. But again, remember, not a tank, not a tank. Right here, of course, we also see this scout car quickly going down, and we see the armoured car is actually recently fast-reaching Veteran 3. And of course, another thing, of course, if the Soviets sort of considering dealing with it, are mines. Mines make it a lot harder for the armoured car to really do much, because again, one anti-tank mine from the Soviets, and that armoured car is sadly wreckage in most cases, unless you get lucky and it just suffered some kind of critical damage. But overall, you know, try to use it aggressively initially, but still be a bit cautious. If you have a suspicion your opponent is using mines, pull back, and for example, begin taking routes where you're less likely to think you might be hitting mines. For example, in roads, stay off them. For example, take the longer route and sort of try to sneak out around the edge. And here we go. We actually see infantry awareness, and actually see right here, here, there's an infantry squad waiting over there. In this case, I'm using infantry awareness, sort of more specifically, to sort of try and figure out, what is my opponent actually doing? Where is he? What could I be expecting? And of course, in this case, something's going on over here on the left flank. And in this case, I seem to be not reacting to this very properly, which is a bit silly in my department. And I'll definitely take that one upon my shoulders. But there we go, we see him rapidly pushing ahead there, but overall, I mean, again, the armoured car does possess a bit of utility as a reconnaissance vehicle, as a harassment vehicle, and otherwise as a bit of support. So in those roles, you should just sort of consider using the armoured car and getting the most out of it as a German player, and of course as a Soviet player, you should be aware of it. Again, in the roles of harassment, in the roles of basically trying to hunt down your units and kill them. And if you are going for a lot of support weapons, again, you know, you might also want to be careful about it. You certainly want to get down some mines to sort of protect your flanks, because an armoured car then getting close to any of your support weapons can quickly spell doom and destruction. But, you know, getting a pair of them, for example, establishing a small armoured patrol, in that case can then be quite handy as the Germans sort of deal with such an event. Anyways, this is Imperial Danes, hoping you've learned something from this Propagandacast Lehr. If you did, feel free to follow, share with everyone, and of course subscribe. This is Imperial, and, you know, saying cheers, and see you tomorrow.